Okay, so today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make chicken broth. This recipe is a lot easier than other recipes because in other recipes you need to use like cut onions, cut carrots, cut celery, and chicken bones and stuff like that. And it's a lot of prep work. But in our chicken broth recipe, we're just going to be using already pre-made rotisserie chickens and salt. So it's a lot easier and there's a lot less actual work that you have to do. And it tastes just like homemade chicken broth. So what we're going to need for this recipe is 4 rotisserie chickens. We use rotisserie chicken from Costco. They're a Kirkland brand rotisserie chicken. But you can use other rotisserie chickens from other stores like Safeway, but I don't think they're as good. I think Costco has the best rotisserie chicken. This is why I'm going to use the Costco brand. We're going to be using table salt instead of kosher salt because table salt has iodine in it, which helps prevent goiters and thyroid diseases. This table salt is cheaper than kosher salt, and in this recipe it really does not matter if you use kosher salt or table salt. But those are the reasons why we're just going to use table salt in this recipe as opposed to kosher salt. Okay, so we're going to be deboning the chicken, and we're going to put the chicken meat in this bowl here. And all like the juices, the skin, and the bones into this pot here. This is an 18-quart pot. So chicken skin into the pot. You don't use the chicken meat to make the chicken broth. And we're just gonna stick this chicken carcass into the pot. And we're gonna dump the juices into the pot too. And then we're going to do this with the other 3 chickens as well. Okay, so the reason why making chicken broth from these rotisserie chickens works is because when the people made the rotisserie chicken, they added all the spices and all the flavorings that basically you need in chicken broth. So we can skip the step of having to add like vegetables and stuff because it's already in the chicken and it already has that flavor. Okay, so we have our chicken carcasses, 4 chickens deboned, and we have all the skin and all the juices in here. And we're going to add 32 cups of water. Now we're going to add a tablespoon of table salt. We only add 1 tablespoon of salt because we want our chicken broth to be a little less salty than normal because we use our chicken broth for recipes and we want to be able to make sure that the recipe is not too salty. But if you're going to actually make like chicken soup out of it, then you can add more salt to taste so that your chicken broth is a little saltier. Most traditional chicken broth recipes, it involves cooking the chicken broth on a lower heat for a longer amount of time, but we don't really have the patience for that, so we're just going to cook it on high heat for a shorter amount of time. So we're going to boil this for 2 hours on high heat with the cap on for the first 40 minutes, and then we're going to take the cap off so it doesn't overboil. So we put in 32 cups of water or 2 gallons of water initially so that the chicken is submerged in the water, and throughout the cooking process most of the chicken will be submerged and will cook in the water. Okay, so it's been 40 minutes now, so we're going to take the cap off. As you can see, it is boiling, and we take the cap off because we want to let some of the water boil off so that it'll make the soup more concentrated and it'll taste better. Okay, and then now we're just going to boil for the remaining 1 hour and 20 minutes without the cap on so that water evaporates and we get a more flavorful soup. The chicken broth has been boiling for about 2 hours now, and as you can see, the water level has decreased by a lot, so we have a very concentrated soup flavor of chicken broth. And now we're just going to turn the heat off, and we're going to fish out the bones and the skin and all that stuff with a strainer. Okay, so I've got most of the big particles out, like the big chicken bones and the carcasses, but now we're going to we're going to pour the broth through this strainer into another pot, so that we get all the the finer particles and to get any of the other pieces of bone that we missed when we were doing this. Okay, so we're gonna pour the chicken broth into this pot here through the strainer. This pot here is an 8-quart pot, if you're wondering. And our strainer, it caught all the smaller particles that we missed when we were initially taking out all the bigger chunks of chicken bones. Okay, so we have our chicken broth, and right now it's really hot, so we're just going to leave it out in the kitchen for a couple of hours so it can come down to room temperature so we can stick it in the fridge to chill for about 1 or 2 days so that the fat can solidify and come to the top. Okay, so to ensure that the fat solidifies, we're just going to turn the fridge colder. Okay, so we are back. It has been a day since we put our chicken broth into the fridge. We're just going to pull it out. So you see the fat is on top and it's solidified. And we're just gonna take the fat and we're gonna scoop it off because we don't want the fat. You need to do this quickly, so before the fat melts, because then you won't be able to scoop it off. So after we scoop off a layer of fat, we're gonna have like a layer of chicken broth that's not 100% fat free. So we're gonna scoop that into a separate container and then we're gonna set it aside. And then we're gonna scoop out the middle portion of the broth, which is all fat-free broth. You also want to make sure that you don't scoop all the way to the bottom, because at the bottom there's a lot of sediments from the particles that the strainer could not catch when we were straining the broth. After you scoop out all the middle layer of the broth, you're gonna want to scoop out the broth with all the sediments in it, and you're gonna put it in a separate container and use it for recipes where it doesn't really matter if the broth is completely sediment-free or not. Alright, so the way that we store our chicken broth is we ladle the chicken broth into like a soup container that we have. We get these soup containers from like takeout restaurants and other places. And then you can just freeze it. Make sure you don't fill it all the way up to the top, because when it freezes it will expand. So we just fill it up like probably about a couple of centimeters from the top, and then we freeze it. And that's how we store it. And we can always just like thaw it and then use it in whatever recipe you want to use it in.